Ladies and gentlemen, this is a warning. Thank you.
Denver police have identified a serial killer who murdered 5 women more than 40 years ago.
In January 2022, DNA helped police solve the 1979 to 1981 murders of 4 women. Joe Michael Irvin, who had taken his life shortly after the last victim, was positively linked after over 40 years. But those were not the only unsolved murders of young women in the Mile High City from the 70s to 90s. As many as 27 to 38 women, many of whom worked in the sex trade, were being found at a rate of twice a year in a 20-year span. But it would not be until 2008 that any of the crimes were linked. Another deceased killer, Billy Edwin Reed, would be linked in another 2 murders, but could not be proven in any of the others. But it is impossible for these men to have been the only ones. There was at least 1 or more other killers roaming the streets of Denver for over 2 or more decades before going silent. Recent advancements have helped answer some mysteries, but many more remain. Whether 2, 3, or more serial killers, as of now, these unknown men have been attributed to a single name: the Denver Prostitute Killer.
Goes on in San Francisco for the man known as the Zodiac Killer.
There could be a serial killer in Chicago.
The Oakland County child killer.
Phantom killer.
Frankfurt slasher.
4 children have now been murdered.
Has killed 5 and says he's going to kill again.
15 brutally murdered young women.
The pattern is the same.
One by one,
the death count started rising.
A man in a mask robbed, tied, and stabbed them.
Strangled, stuffed in burlap bags.
It is highly unlikely that these women were murdered by separate men.
Where will the killer strike next?
Police can't answer who or why.
That's the question that we'll never know.
I don't want to live the rest of my life wondering if this person's going to be caught.
I believe that there's someone out there that has knowledge.
And he's probably still at large.
If you know Ruin Road, you know we value our privacy. But in our personal life, it's not always easy to maintain. Whether we know it or not, sites will mine our data like full name, email, health records, and more, which they will sell to scammers, spammers, and anyone else who wants to snoop. That's why we started using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows us which data brokers are selling our personal information and automatically submits opt-out requests on our behalf. This not only reduces the amount of spam you'll get, but protects against hackers who can use this information to gain access to our social media, bank accounts, and other sensitive information. Aura also provides a ton of other features bundled into one easy-to-use app at an affordable price. You get antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without needing to bother with different apps. We all have one or more of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door and leaving the back door wide open. And if you're a regular viewer, you'll know how often that happens. Like 24-hour security, motion sensors, and guard dogs, Aura is always on, doing the hard work of keeping my info safe so I can focus on other tasks with peace of mind. Relaxing. Ruin Road values our privacy, and we also value yours. Go to aura.com/ruinroad to start a free 2-week trial, also linked below in the description. Reviewing dozens of unsolved murders, Denver PD would decide upon 16 women as probable victims to the Denver serial killer. The women were typically known sex workers, usually abducted while hitchhiking or picked up from bars or fast food restaurants. Their beaten and strangled bodies then dumped in rural areas off of Interstate 70 in the metro Denver region. Some were sickly posed with their legs spread apart as wide as possible. Using this data, one can find as many as 26 others that could fit into that pattern. With a victim list of over 50, this will be no easy task, and I've decided to split a chronological timeline into separate chapters. First, we'll cover the 16 official victims, then going over the possible ones. Before we dive into this case, I need to warn you it's going to get complicated. Police believe as many as 6 serial killers were active in the Denver area during this time period. Further difficulty comes from the fact no complete list of the victims attributed to which killer has been made available, making this a much more difficult task. The investigation narrowed down the list to 16 victims they believe attributed to the one killer. But there are many others with similarities. It was June 19, 1976, when 21-year-old Rebecca Kellison went out for a Friday night at the clubs with her sister and her sister's husband the weekend before her beauty school final exams. She would spend the night at their home near East Colfax Avenue and Madison Street. The next morning, she left a note she was heading back to her parents' home in Aurora, believed to either take the bus or hitchhike. She would never be seen again. 2 years later, in December 1977, a farmer plowing his field in what is now the runway at the Denver International Airport would uncover a pile of buried clothing. It would turn out to be Rebecca's, including her shoes and underwear. Police would state that they would search the field then and before the runway was built, though Rebecca's parents dispute their thoroughness. It has been speculated that animals may have taken her remains over the half year they were out there. Meanwhile, the second young girl to go missing was 15-year-old Gail Paige Johnston on August 26, 1976, when she said she was going to go hitchhike somewhere. It was September 5th that year when her nude, bound, and gagged body was found about 9 miles west of the airport, on the side of these railroad tracks off of Highway 2. She had been shot in the head. It was August 18, 1979, when the partially nude and beaten body of a young woman was found 30 feet from the road near I-70 and Gun Club Road, south of the airport area. Her legs had been spread apart. Police would ask the public for help identifying her, and received over 200 tips, including one that a young girl had been seen sitting in a car with a husky blonde man in a Chevy Nova or Vega, Denver's Capitol Hill neighborhood. Finally, the body would be identified as 16-year-old Kimberly Jean Graben. Frequently running away from home due to sexual abuse, Kimberly had been sent to the Lookout Mountain School in March the previous year, but continued to run away. The final time from the Chatfield Recreation Area during a work release program on July 23rd. She frequently hung out in the Capitol Hill area along East Colfax Avenue, last seen on August 17th when Vice officers spoke with her. Other witnesses reported a light-colored car parked all night near where she was murdered, in which a man and woman were seen inside. A few days later, a similar incident occurred in the nearby Rocky Mountain National Park, but the woman survived. However, police could not prove a link between the man arrested and Kimberly. No photos exist of 19-year-old Cynthia Boyd, a sex worker last seen at her home at 3830 Elizabeth Street in Denver. On February 21, 1980, her strangled and nude body would be found lying face down on the East 88th Avenue roadway, about in front of the Tower Road landfill. She had ligature marks on her neck, and though initial reports stated she was pregnant, an autopsy would disprove this rumor. While very little information exists on Cynthia and the earlier victims, just 1 month later, another murder would occur that was so savage it is still remembered today. In a similar story, 15-year-old Stephanie Ann Bauman had run away from a group home for troubled children. After her parents divorced, there was tension in the family, and Stephanie had voluntarily checked herself into the group home, but decided to flee. For 2 weeks, she had stayed with friends while working on contacting her family to get back home. It was October 28, 1980, when a driver along County Road 173 south of Byers, Colorado, spotted the nude body of a female in a ditch alongside the road. A sketch was released that would identify her as Stephanie. The investigation was able to piece together her horrific final hours. 4 miles down the road, near where an old windmill stood at the time, someone had forced her to strip nude and sexually assaulted her. Afterwards, she either escaped or was forced to walk east down the road for almost 3 miles. Her footprints were still visible in the morning, allowing the police to see she mostly walked in the ditch on the left side of the road, but occasionally had wandered out onto the road. Though she passed several farmhouses, she would turn left onto Bradbury Road and continue on for another mile. At one point, the man in the car following her used the vehicle to pin her up against a barbed wire fence. Finally, Stephanie collapsed in the ditch here, dying of hypothermia. Her killer would spread her legs before leaving around 6 a.m., only about 30 minutes before she was discovered. Police would bring the father of another missing girl to the scene to identify her, but he would say it was not his child. Bizarrely, he would say this girl did resemble someone he saw dancing at a garage party with another female and 4 men the night before on the property her clothes were found on. Others reported seeing a car of 4 women in the area acting strange, and later only 3 being in the car. It was January 24th the next year when 17-year-old Antoinette Parks would storm away from her boyfriend's home after a fight. Antoinette had been forced to drop out of school her senior year after getting pregnant and begun working at Denny's. She and her boyfriend had frequently argued about keeping the child. The next morning, garbage men would spot what they thought was a mannequin in a field near the house. It turned out to be the body of Antoinette. The 7 months pregnant mother had been stabbed 23 times. A stick had been jammed inside her stomach. The police would believe she had been killed elsewhere and dragged to the field. A cord used to tie a carpet had been used to bind her. An X had been cut on one of her lips, which was theorized as being what is known as a snitch's mark, given to those who talk to police about a crime. Naturally, her boyfriend was the prime suspect. And when Antoinette's brother, George Journey, was released from prison 2 weeks after the murder, he went to that boyfriend's apartment and held him over the balcony railing, threatening to drop him unless he confessed. The man held firm he was innocent. It would not be until 2022 that Antoinette's killer was confirmed to be Joe Michael Irvin, who killed at least 3 other women, none of whom were suspected as the Denver Stranglers. The next murder seems to be an outlier, but as it was included on the list, detectives may know something that the public does not. Jesse Bennett would be found lying in a snowbank in a field off of 64th and Piccadilly Road on January 21st, 1982. He had been shot to death. Weighing only 126 pounds and having long hair, perhaps the killer mistook him for a young woman? It was June 18, 1983, when 12-year-old Sabrina Judish went missing from a YMCA camp she was at in Commerce City, just west of Rocky Mountain Park. Nicknamed Wienerbug, it was initially believed she was a runaway as well. But on May 18th the following year, a skeleton was found in a farm field near East 64th and Powhatan Road. It was clothed only in a YMCA camp t-shirt, the same one Sabrina had been wearing. Though a cause of death could not be determined, her death was listed as suspicious. Another woman that would be not found for some months was 27-year-old Lillian Olguin, last seen October 7, 1984. 2 months later, on December 28th, her body was found in the South Platte River near this bend in Commerce City. It was believed she had been drowned, but could not be confirmed. Another outlier is 52-year-old Helen Fukui. Either intentionally or coincidentally, Helen went missing on December 7, 1984, Pearl Harbor Day. As an Asian woman, Helen would have been aware of the high amount of incidents against her nationality on that day when she left to go Christmas card shopping. The next day, her family would find her car 3 blocks away from the home with a flat tire near the intersection of York and Coronado. Several weeks later, joggers along the Clear Creek Trail about a mile south of where her car was found spotted clothing in the water bank and alerted police, who would in turn find the body of Helen stuck near this sandbank 500 feet east of York Street. When 2 other women turned up in the South Platte River a few months later, police would investigate the cases as linked. It was February 18, 1985, when 25-year-old mother of one Vicki Carpenter went missing after leaving a fashion contest at a local saloon. Her car found left in an apartment complex. Then, on February 24th, college student Denise Davenport would vanish after leaving her job at the Greeley Mall. Her car found in a lot outside in the UNC parking lot. On April 2nd, boys fishing in Cherry Creek would find Vicki Carpenter's body. She had been tied down with chains and cinder blocks. On April 29th, kayakers found Denise in the South Platte River. Back outside Denver, on April 5th that year, a farmer plowing his field near County Road 25 and 72nd Avenue would unearth the partial remains of a still unidentified Caucasian female between 50 and 60 years old. A roll of black electrical tape was found on the grave. It was June 14, 1986, when 18-year-old Donna Sue Wayne left a party in Montebello with 3 men. Later that night, a woman coming home from her job at Stapleton Airport noticed a car zigzagging in front of her along Piccadilly Road, before it finally swerved to a stop. Driving around it, the woman noticed a young girl fighting to escape with a man with crazy eyes. The airport employee would drive to the nearest home and phone police, but when they arrived, they told her it was likely a domestic dispute and not to worry. It was a month later when a man searching through trash piles near the corner of Piccadilly and 38th would spot a skeleton propped against a tree. Her legs had been spread. Hearing the news, the witness would check with police and help identify Donna. She would also choose a man out of a photo lineup that was the owner of the property Stephanie Bauman's clothes were found on. Years later, he would be caught in a sting trying to murder his wife, but his DNA would not match that found on the murdered women. Very little is known about 48-year-old Marilyn Rohr, who was found dead on the floor of a bar on March 5, 1987, in the vicinity of Lillian Olguin and Antoinette Park's crime scenes. Whether the bar was open or closed, or how she was killed, has never been released. On July 5th that year, 18-year-old Carolyn Walker would borrow her boyfriend's car to drive back to her own home after they spent a night at the bars. But the vehicle would break down and was found pushed into the lot near 13th Avenue and Colorado Boulevard, possibly with the help of her killer, police theorize. 2 days later, her body would be found in a ditch near I-70 and Colfax, just across the toll road from where Kimberly Grabin was found. After being sexually assaulted, Carolyn was strangled and hit on the head with an unknown object. Her legs had been spread apart. It was the day before Christmas Eve that year when 18-year-old Heidi McGuire would clock out for her third to last day working at what was then Circle K convenience store in Welby, north of Denver and just 1,400 feet from where Helen's car was found 3 years prior. A customer would ask for a lift home, which Heidi gave him, drinking a soda before leaving that man's house. 5 days later, her car would be found in a ditch west of town. But on Valentine's Day, 2 fox hunters in a field where this subdivision now is would discover the girl's body. She'd been killed by a blow to the head. A task force would form to look at the 2 1987 murders, along with 6 others that occurred between 1987 and 1988, believed to be the work of one man, who they referred to as the body dump killer. The task force would identify a man named Vincent Groves for the crime spree over the past 2 years. But there was a problem with the others. Groves had been in prison since 1982, meaning he couldn't have committed all of them. The final victim selected when the cases were reopened in 2011 is a complete mystery, not appearing in the Colorado Homicide Victims Database. Someone named Mary Stewart went missing or was murdered in Adams County in Denver, 1991. As the decades progressed, so too these murders would be forgotten, until 2008 when one detective would note the similarities in the spread legs victims. Assembling a team of 4, they would compile the previous list as possibly attributed to one killer. But at the same time, they would note similarities between as many as 38 victims between up to 6 different killers operating at the same time. And in the time since, even more murders have been linked between one another. Just how big is the case of the Denver serial killer? 1 year before Rebecca Kellison went missing, it was April 15th, 1975, when 18-year-old Melanie Susan Cooley would disappear while hitchhiking home from Nederland High School. It was May 2nd when 2 road maintenance workers near the intersection of Twin Spruce and Coal Creek Canyon roads would find her nude body about 150 yards north of the road. A large rock left nearby had been used to bludgeon her to death, which was estimated to have occurred about 3 days after her disappearance. Her hands had been tied behind her with a long yellow nylon cord, and a pillowcase was left over her head. When Ted Bundy was arrested in Salt Lake City in October that year, police would question him in Melanie's death, along with 4 other murders of young women similar to his victims. He would eventually be proven to have committed 2 of them, but Melanie's has never been conclusively linked. On August 26, 1975, the body of 19-year-old Rebecca Bell was found floating in the South Platte River near the 15th Street Bridge in Cuernavaca Park. Little information exists about Rebecca, who was last seen spending the night at a family member's 2 days prior. Her autopsy revealed she had drowned, but is believed to be a homicide due to suspicious circumstances and other injuries found on the body. It was Christmas Eve 1976 when 22-year-old Tina Grant's boyfriend reported her missing when he went to pick her up from the club she worked at on East Colfax. 2 days later, a driver near where 7th and Alcott end by the South Platte spotted something strange in the dirt near where railroad tracks used to run. Police would respond to what was then a much more remote area to find the body of Tina Grant. Her death would be ruled as a homicide due to, quote, significant injuries. 30-year-old Maria Abatello Smith worked at the Airmen's Club on Lowry Air Force Base when she went missing on November 20th, 1977. 6 days later, her body would be found in what was then a vacant field behind 741 Mariposa Street, less than 4,000 feet east of where Tina Grant was left, as well as being along railroad tracks. On June 11, 1978, 2 hikers walking through Reynolds Park southwest of Denver would find the nude body of 18-year-old Jeanette Baca at the bottom of a 10-foot embankment on the side of Foxton Road. Someone had hidden the high school student turned sex worker's body there about 5 to 10 days prior. The cause of death could not be determined. The coroner ruled out stabbing, strangulation, or shooting. 9 days later, some of her belongings were found 1.5 miles away in a burn pile. Police would interrogate her pimp, a man by the name of Vincent Groves, but could not find any evidence against him. With the benefit of looking back, we now know that Vincent Groves was one of Denver's most prolific serial killers in history, suspected of as many as 24 murders as the first identified prostitute killer in the city. It was not until after his death that DNA would match Groves to several unsolved murders, of which we'll be investigating in this chapter.
We're also learning new details about 4 Denver murders unsolved for decades.
Cases that Denver police are now calling closed thanks to DNA evidence. The bodies of 3 of the victims were found in 1979, the last victim in 1988. Police now say DNA evidence links all of the crimes to this man, Vincent Groves.
Authorities believe at the height of Groves' killing spree, he was murdering as many as 2 women per month, a serial killer who tormented families from here in Fort Morgan to Denver and across the state.
He killed a lot of girls.
Vincent Groves was sentenced to life in prison in 1990 for sexually assaulting and strangling Gloria's daughter, Juanita Lovato. Denver cold case detective Milas Yearling cracked those cases wide open this week using new DNA technology and good old-fashioned police work.
It's because of the things he had done before. The chances of randomly selecting a person in the U.S. population that would be a matching DNA profile to Vincent Groves was 1 in 3.3 quadrillion.
As the only African-American student in the Denver suburb of Wheat Ridge at that time, Vince was a popular student. He was the all-star of the varsity basketball team. He was in the running for prom king. But things changed when he left for college out of state. Vince quit basketball, missed class, and eventually dropped out, moving back home and getting a job as an electrician by the late 70s. During this time, Groves began to frequent Denver's red light district on East Colfax, becoming a familiar face. He began dealing drugs on the side, meeting and eventually murdering Jeanette Baca. On March 26, 1979, police checking up on a welfare call entered the apartment formerly located at the corner of Garfield and 2nd in Denver's Cherry Creek neighborhood to find 25-year-old Emma Jennifer strangled in the bathtub. On July 4, 1979, police found the body of 23-year-old Joyce Ramey in what was then a vacant lot in the southeast side of Havana and 56th Avenue. After sexually assaulting her, her killer had strangled her and left the body posed with her hands above her head and her legs spread. On August 24th that year, 21-year-old Norma Jean Halford's car would be found left on the side of the road here, 6.4 miles up the road from Georgetown, Colorado. She would last be seen in that town 2 days later. Her body has never been found. At the time, Norma was living with Vincent Groves. On November 3rd, 20-year-old Peggy Cuff was found in this alley behind South Ogden Street. The class president of her high school back in Philadelphia, she had moved to Denver after graduation to work at a bank. Many of these women were known to have been addicted to drugs, which by now Vincent had also begun using his own supply and was developing a violent temper. He would meet Jeanette Hill during this time, quitting his job as an electrician and becoming a janitor while still dealing drugs. The two would get married in March 1981, but due to his odd work schedule, Vincent was not often around. 1 month after the marriage, 25-year-old Juanita Mitchell would be found dead inside the Cottonwood Motel on East Colfax. A rag had been stuffed into her mouth. On July 2nd, 17-year-old Pamela Morgan would also be found in an Aurora motel. On August 14th, Vince would leave on a fishing trip with 2 friends and one of their daughters, 17-year-old Tammy Woodrum. The next day, he returned home to his parents' house where he still lived, distraught. He confessed to his wife that he and Tammy had gone to Boulder to score some coke and she overdosed. Not sure what to do, he put her body in the camper he was towing. Upon her urging, Vince would turn himself in, where police quickly found out that Tammy had been sexually assaulted, beaten, and strangled. They didn't know it then, but police had caught one serial killer. The problem was that bodies didn't stop turning up in Denver. To keep things straight, we'll stay on with those confirmed and suspected by Groves. He would be sentenced to 12 years jail time, joining the newly created Real Concerned Cons Club, a group who spoke to children about how crime doesn't pay. After 5 years, Vincent Groves would be released and was back in Denver in 1987. One month later, he picked up Sheila Washington and the pair went to room 8 of the El Patio Motel on Colfax. After giving her some crack cocaine, he tried strangling her, saved only when a neighbor kicked the door down. Not knowing his name, it would be a year before Sheila spotted Groves again and reported him to police. In the meantime, he was left free to kill. It was April 1987 when 31-year-old sex worker Rhonda Fisher's nude and strangled body was found beside a culvert near Highway 105, about halfway between Denver and Colorado Springs. Rhonda's life had not been easy. She was divorced, her child put up for adoption, and had a criminal record when she was last seen walking East Colfax the night before she was found. From a different walk of life, 19-year-old Zabra Mason was an honors student with a job interview when the married mother of two's body was found slumped in her car in a field off of West Colfax Avenue and Kipling Street in Lakewood on September 17th that year. On January 29, 1988, 23-year-old Faye Johnson's nude body was found dumped in the ditch near East 6th Avenue and Manila Road, east of the city. She was last seen getting into a man's car along Colfax Avenue before being strangled. Further east on April 29th, 19-year-old Juanita Lovato's body was found dumped in a field near County Road 36 and East 32nd Avenue. North of Denver near Fort Lupton, 22-year-old Robin Nelson's body was dumped in a field on June 12th. A month later would be the first victim we know anything about. 25-year-old Diane Mancera lived a transient lifestyle. Unemployed, regularly found drinking around Denver. She was last seen walking Colfax Avenue around 2 a.m. the morning of July 25th. 4 hours later, a truck driver on I-25 south of Denver would spot her body near a culvert by exit 190 to Surrey Ridge, an off-ramp that no longer exists today. Her legs had been pulled up, and her face twisted down to the ground. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled. On August 12th, 35-year-old Carolyn Buchanan was found beneath a bridge on Tower Road, east of Denver. Just 2 days later, police would get a break. It was 5:30 a.m. when a man loading his car in preparation for a triathlon would hear a car pull into the alley behind his garage. Curious, he would look over the fence, only to see a tall African-American man pulling a corpse from his trunk. The man quietly fled back into his home and phoned police, who discovered the body of 35-year-old sex worker Pamela Montgomery strangled in the alley. Though he couldn't ID the man, he was able to state it was the same car that Vincent Groves drove and made the same rattling engine noise. Posing as county workers cleaning the gutters, police would stake out the Groves family home at 12565 West 31st Avenue in Wheat Ridge. Neighbors came out to thank them, saying they had never seen anyone clean the street before. But when Vince and his brother stepped out of the house, those workers rushed into action and took him into custody. Police were able to circumstantially link him to 8 murders. including Groves being the last person seen with Jeanette Baca, Faye Johnson, and Zabra Mason. But only the murders of Lovato and Mancera had DNA that conclusively linked Groves. He would get a life sentence for these two, but he wouldn't serve very long. On Halloween Day 1996, Vincent Groves would die from hepatitis C and liver failure, refusing a deathbed confession of any further murders. It would not be until 2012 that DNA proved this serial killer had more victims.
Groves' DNA was not in a national database, but rather Lakewood police had it on file from a 1981 slaying, and that's what ultimately helped police put all of these cases together. This latest link now gives even more families closure.
They didn't realize that anyone cared, that anyone was still looking.
And those mothers I know feel like I do. And you still always hurt, but God bless them.
These are the new cases Groves is now linked to, 3 1979 slayings, including 23-year-old Joyce Ramey, 20-year-old Peggy Cuff, and 25-year-old Emma Jennifer. Also, witness accounts and DNA now tie Groves to the 1988 murder of 35-year-old Pamela Montgomery.
Other murders Groves has been suspected of include Melanie Cooley, Sabrina Judish, Cynthia Boyd, and Carolyn Walker. Estimates say he could have killed as many as 24 women, but there are others he couldn't have committed. Even when Vincent was behind bars in the 80s and 90s, someone was still murdering sex workers in Denver. First, we rewind back to September 1979. Norma Jean Halford's car had been found 1 month prior. But on September 1st, the same day Hurricane David would hit the Dominican Republic, a family enjoying a sunny picnic at Pierce Park in Arvada, northwest of Denver, would walk down to the corner of 82nd and 72 to pick cattails. There, down the embankment, they discovered the nude and beaten body of 17-year-old Linda Hutchins. Last seen 3 weeks earlier getting pizza with her boyfriend and their friend group, she supposedly left to hitchhike home. A few years older than Linda, the boyfriend was known to have a temper and would drive over to the Hutchins home the next morning because he had a bad feeling. A few days later, while police were searching for missing clothes, one of the helicopters they were using would crash into a wire line, but both men inside would escape with only minor injuries. In 1984, serial killer Henry Lee Lucas would be charged with Linda's murder as part of 600 victims nationwide he confessed to committing, but would later recant. On October 23, 1979, 19-year-old sex worker Sheila Burrell would be last seen at what was now the Orlando Apartments on East Colfax, just a block from where Vincent Groves attempted to strangle Sheila Washington 9 years later. Known as Cricket on the streets, she was said to have been in hiding after owing a large amount of money to a Kansas City drug dealer, and over 100 persons of interest were questioned in her death. 2 days after going missing, her body was found off of Frontage Road and County Road 51 up in Keensburg, making her the furthest dump site thus far. Though she was found nude and had been beaten in the head, her death was listed as an overdose. December 18th would see the final murder of that bloody year. After going to the local bars with friends to watch the Denver Broncos game, 34-year-old Roxanne Valverde would be found lying dead in the road near East 46 and Glencoe streets. She had been strangled. Our story next picks up in 1981. By now, Cynthia Boyd, Stephanie Bauman, and Antoinette Parks had been killed. The same month that Juanita Mitchell would be killed, 29-year-old child care worker Lois Jenkins would be found in her car near the now-gone intersection of Smith and Fairfax, about 2,000 feet south from where Roxanne Valverde had been strangled 2 years prior. She was last seen at a nightclub nearby the previous night. Someone had used a belt to strangle her, Fingerprints left on it were too smudged to be usable. Next, 2 weeks after Vincent Groves had turned himself in, on August 30th, the body of 18-year-old Janine Moore was found in Genesee Park.
Jeannie Marie Moore was a pretty girl who liked to write poetry. She would have been 19 next month. She lived here with her mom and 2 sisters. Last Tuesday, about 4 blocks from her home, she was seen getting into a car that had stopped to pick her up near the Harlan exit on I-70. The Tenneco station near 13th and Wadsworth, where she had worked for a couple months, was her destination. But Jeannie never got to work last Tuesday. Her whereabouts were unknown until just yesterday afternoon, when picnickers discovered her body here in Genesee Park, 17.5 miles from home. Her grief-stricken mother today spoke with us next to the zinnias Jeannie had planted in front of the house.
In fact, her boss gave her a 10-speed to ride back and forth to work, but she didn't take it. She wouldn't use it. It was faster getting there hitching. She's dead because of it now.
Mrs. Moore hopes the tragic murder of her daughter will be a lesson to other hitchhikers.
Stay out of them. You just don't know. My beautiful daughter is dead because of some nut. Please stay out of them. Every time you think about getting into a car, think of Jeannie.
After being sexually assaulted, she had died from head trauma. Chronologically, the next murders to occur would be Jessie Bennett, Sabrina Judish, Lillian Olguin, Helen Fuqua, and the April 1985 Jane Doe, before high schooler Tracy Lynn Wooden would be last seen at the Denver General Hospital on August 11, 1985, after suffering some minor cuts in a motorcycle accident. While Tracy had run away in the past and had been a partier, this time, only an hour and a half later, her strangled body would be found in what at that time was an alleyway behind the Fox Supply Company in downtown Denver, now apartments beside Coors Field. She had been left with her bra pulled up to expose her breasts. On November 24th that year, a driver along Highway 285 in Conifer would spot the nude body of Lenora Cortez on the side of the road near the intersection with Light Lane. Her family would state the 21-year-old had no home and lived a transient lifestyle. It was September 17, 1986, when 2 workers loading gravel from this area near the Coors Distribution Center would follow a smell into some brush to find the decaying body of Julia DeTemple. The 26-year-old had last been seen 1 month earlier, when she hitchhiked to a local bar and then went to Red Rocks Park, as confirmed by a ticket found in her pocket. A cause of death has not been released, but police do consider it a homicide. On March 24, 1988, a group of hikers just west of the entrance to Beaver Brook Trail on Lookout Mountain in Golden would spot the body of a woman about 15 feet down the side of this hill. She was lying head first and had been there an estimated 2 months, a single fingerprint being able to be lifted. It would not be until 2005 that she would be identified as 33-year-old Lisa Kelly, a sex worker from Denver, last seen by a family member September 1987. It was April 29, 1988, when 19-year-old Shannon McLean and a friend were hitchhiking in South Denver when they were picked up by a chubby Caucasian male. The friend would be dropped off here on East Yale and University Hills, but Shannon stayed in the car. 3 months later, near Homestead and where Lenora Cortez was dumped, her body would be found lying off of 285 and Surrey Road with no visible signs of trauma. On November 25, 1988, 21-year-old Jessica Arredondo was planning to meet up with her boyfriend and friends in her new red Mustang she had purchased with her own money. Her car would be found with its flashers on at the corner of 7th and Jackson. A witness would state it appeared she had been being chased when she got into a fender bender and 3 men abducted her. The next day, a group having a snowball fight would find her body 30 feet from Highway 36 near the Lions Gulch trailhead outside of Estes Park, about an hour and a half north from her vehicle. Her head had been so badly beaten, fingerprints were needed to identify her, and she appeared to either have jumped or been dumped from a moving vehicle. In 1994, a co-worker of Jessica's named Robert Harlan would be arrested for the similar kidnapping and murder of Rhonda Maloney, which he received a life sentence for. He'd become a suspect in Jessica's murder, but denied involvement and was not prosecuted for her murder for lack of evidence. Another murder that had a suspect identified but remains open is that of Sharon K. Stone. The 46-year-old had just come to Denver 2 months prior to work for a temp agency when she was last seen on Colfax Avenue. In July 1989, a man looking for his hubcap down the embankment of this road outside the city of Golden would find her badly decomposed body. Cause of death could not be determined. 28-year-old sex worker Linnell Williams was last seen October 12th that year by her mother in Aurora. 2 days later, a pair of Colorado School of Mines students came to Clear Creek near Tunnel 1 on US Highway 6, just north of Lookout Mountain. The pair had intended to pan for gold, but just off the dirt service road, they would find the body of Linnell. Pantyhose, a sock, belt, and an extension cord had all been wrapped around her neck to strangle her to death. On April 14, 1990, a couple walking their dog on North Table Mountain would come to this area near the base and 50 yards north of Highway 58 when they found the unclothed body of a 15-year-old girl by a clump of trees. She would be identified as Jessica Caudill from Georgia, who had run away from her home March 13th. Described as a free spirit, Jessica regularly left to hitch rides as far as California in the past. Police circulated photos of the girl, who wanted to be a rock star, and someone reported they believed they spotted her at this truck stop, which at that time was a Union 76 in Wheat Ridge, just 6 miles down the road from where she was found. Jessica would be the last body found in Golden. The next possible victim would be found in a field by the landfill in Erie, Colorado, just north of Denver. Valerie Meeks was a 36-year-old mother and sex worker on Colfax Avenue when she was reported missing on July 3, 1991. Her naked body would be found on July 17th along this service road behind the Denver Regional Landfill. The plastic bag used to suffocate her had been left wrapped around her head. Leah Lobmeyer was a 30-year-old nurse who worked nights as a masseuse and call girl. Last seen in a home in Wheat Ridge at 2 a.m., 3.5 hours later, and 4 miles away, police responding to a car crash at the intersection of West 42nd and Julian would find her vehicle. The driver had fled, leaving the body of Leah upside down in the passenger seat. Her shirt was off and her bra had been pulled up. She had been strangled. It was November 15, 1992, when hunters found the body of Tammy Cheeks with a plastic bag over her head in the concrete irrigation ditch near County Roads 20 and 51. The 25-year-old mother of 2 was also a known sex worker and drug user who worked along Colfax Avenue. Due to decomposition, her death could not be determined. Things would go silent for 3 years. Denver's population would boom over the 90s, expanding the city's urban sprawl to many once rural areas where killers had dumped their bodies. While much was different from the 70s, the next murder would eerily recall one 2 decades earlier. It was August 9th, 1995, when 21-year-old Jennifer Larson went to a friend's house to party in Aurora, not leaving until the next morning. 1 week later, her car would be found with the keys left inside it at an apartment complex a mile from her apartment. While Jenny was described as a free spirit, foul play was suspected. In the meantime, on the night of August 12th, 36-year-old Veronica Lucero would accept a ride from a man when leaving the top of the town bar in Villa Park neighborhood of southwest Denver. Back in 1984, she was a bank teller while attending college, but in the following decade, little is known about Veronica. Her body would be found lying in the street at what was then the intersection of Hazel Court and West 7th, dead from unspecified homicide. 2 months would go by when a sunflower farmer would discover a skeleton just 10 feet past his barbed wire fence in this field half a mile north of Quincy Avenue out by the airport. Dental records would prove it was Jennifer Larson. Over the 2 months, animals and bugs had picked at her as she mummified, leaving just 40 pounds of the 125-pound girl left. Her clothes were missing, and though a COD was not determined, the medical examiner listed homicide. A few days later, Jenny's friends decided to pay a visit to the field one late night. But when they arrived, they spotted a lone white man sitting in a truck along the road. Speaking with him, he pointed them to the exact area where the body was found. Whoever this man was, police have stated they have an interest in him. It would not preclude him from other unsolved murders. Chiefly that of Stephanie Bauman, as the windmill where she was assaulted was less than 2,500 feet from where Jenny was dumped. Another suspect was a man from that party who had a history of violence towards women, but as yet, no one has been arrested in her murder. With Vincent Groves' death and the new millennium, the cases of the Denver Stranglers grew cold. The first break in the case would come a decade after the last murder, when DNA evidence found on Linnell Williams and Lisa Kelly would match that of Billy Edwin Reed. Previously convicted of sexual assault, detectives would run over other cases against him, including that of Queena Sanders, who was found on Valentine's Day 1988, but they did not have enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. The year of his life sentence, the Cold Case Task Force would open to look at the first 16 women, linking Vincent Groves to the 4 additional murders in 2012. DNA would also confirm 2 of the women we previously covered as possible victims to 2 separate, now deceased killers. First, Daniel Filoviter would be proven as the killer of Tracy Wooden in 1985. He would be sent to prison months later for different sexual assault, where he remained until his death in 2006. In 2019, Donald Perea was proven to be the killer of Jeannie Moore in 1981, a crime he committed while out on bail for another sexual assault case. He would die in 2012.
It was a murder case that had gone cold, but nearly 40 years later, investigators say they now know who killed Jeannie Moore.
Today, investigators announced they have identified Donald Perea as her killer.
It's really incredible, and the individual they've linked to the crime while he's no longer alive, they are confident here. They say, in fact, he is 3.3 trillion times more likely to have committed that crime than anybody else. And while it's too soon to call this closure for her sisters, they say they have been thinking of her and keeping her memory alive every single day.
If either man had any other crimes, they took them to their graves. Investigators concluded that Billy Reed and Vincent Groves were likely responsible for the majority of the cases we have covered. while at the same time realizing there are many neither could have committed. Over the past decade, Denver has utilized grants to try retrieving DNA from these cold cases. But unfortunately, time has been unkind to much of the evidence. While future technology will no doubt help answer some of these questions, with every year that passes, the chance of apprehending a living suspect and getting answers dwindles in the case of the Denver Stranglers.